throw them away after a few months' use. And considering the level of technology displayed by this monstrosity, I should be able to find the tricks and get around any other built-in traps. I think I'll take the job." "Very well. Begin." "Wait a minute, boss. You still have a few things to learn about hired labor. There are always certain working conditions and agreements involved, all of which I'll be happy to list for you." Chapter 8. "What I do not understand is why you must have the other slave," Narsisi whined. "To have the woman, of course, is natural, as well as to have quarters of your own. My father has given his permission, but he also said that I and my brothers are to help you, that the secrets of the engine are to be revealed to no one else." "Then trot right over to him and get permission for the slave Mikah to join me in the work. You can explain that he comes from the same land that I do, and that your secrets are mere children's toys to him. And if Dad wants any other reasons, tell him that I need skilled aid. Someone who knows how to handle tools and who can be trusted to follow directions exactly as given. You and your brothers have entirely too many ideas of your own about how things should be done, and a tendency to leave details up to the gods, and have a good bash with the hammer if things don't work the way they should." Narsisi retired, seething and mumbling to himself, while Jason huddled over the oil stove, planning the next step. It had taken most of the day to lay down logs for rollers and push the sealed engine out into the sandy valley far from the well site. Open space was needed for any experiments where a mistake could release a cloud of war gas. Even Edipon had finally seen the sense of this, though all of his tendencies were to conduct the experiments with great secretiveness behind locked doors. He had granted permission only after skin walls had been erected to form an enclosure that could be guarded. It was only incidental that they acted as a much appreciated windbreak. After much argument, the dangling chains and shackles had been removed from Jason's arms, and lightweight leg irons substituted. He had to shuffle when he walked, but his arms were completely free, a great improvement over the chains, even though one of the brothers kept watch with a cocked crossbow as long as Jason wasn't fastened down. Now he had to get some tools and some idea of the technical knowledge of these people before he could proceed, which would necessarily entail one more battle over their precious secrets. "Come on," he called to his guard. "Let's find Edipon and give his ulcers another twinge." After his first enthusiasm, the leader of the D'zertanoj was getting very little pleasure out of his new project. "You have quarters of your own," he grumbled, "and a slave woman to cook for you, and I have just given permission for the other slave to help you. Now more requests. Do you want to drain all the blood from my body?" "Let's not dramatize it too much. I simply want some tools to get on with my work, and a peek at your machine shop, or wherever it is you do your mechanical work. I have to have some idea of the way you people solve mechanical problems before I can go to work on that box of tricks out there in the desert." "Entrance is forbidden." "Regulations are snapping like straws today, so we might as well go on and finish off a few more. Will you lead the way?" The guards were reluctant to open the refinery building gates to Jason, and there was much rattling of keys and worried looks. A brace of elderly D'zertanoj stinking of oil fumes emerged from the interior and joined in a shouted argument with Edipon, whose will finally prevailed. Chained again and guarded like a murderer, Jason was begrudgingly led into the dark interior, the contents of which was depressingly anticlimactic. "Really from Rubeville," Jason sneered and kicked at the box full of hand-forged and clumsy tools. The work was of the crudest, the product of a sort of Neolithic machine age. The distilling retort had been laboriously formed from sheet copper and clumsily riveted together. It leaked mightily, as did the soldered seams on the hand-formed pipe. Most of the tools were blacksmith's tongs and hammers for heating and beating out shapes on the anvil. The only thing that gladdened Jason's heart were the massive drill press and the lathe that worked off the slave-powered drive belts. In the tool holder of the lathe was clamped a chip of some hard mineral that did a good enough job of cutting the forged iron and low-carbon steel. Even more cheering was the screw-thread advance on the cutting head that was used to produce the massive nuts and bolts that secured the caroj wheels to their shafts. It could have been worse. Jason sorted out the smallest and handiest tools and put them aside for his own use in the morning. The light was almost gone, and there would be no more work this day. They left in armed procession as they came, and a brace of brothers showed him to the kennel-like rooms that was to be his private quarters. The heavy bolt thudded shut in the door behind him, and he winced at the thick fumes of half-burnt kerosene through which the light of the single-wick lamp barely penetrated. Ijale crouched over the small oil stove, cooking something in a pottery bowl. She looked up and smiled hesitatingly at Jason, then turned back to the stove. Jason walked over, sniffed, and shuddered. What a feast! Krenoi soup, and I suppose followed by fresh krenoi and krenoi salad. Tomorrow I see about getting a little variety into the diet. "Ch'aka is great," she whispered without looking up. "Ch'aka is powerful." "Jason is the name. I lost the Ch'aka job when they took the uniform away." "Jason is powerful to work charms on the D'zertanoj and make them do what he will. His slave thanks you." He lifted her chin, and the dumb obedience in her eyes made him wince. "Can't we forget about the slavery bit? We are in this thing together, and we'll get out of it together. We will escape. I knew it. You will kill all the D'zertanoj and release your slaves and lead us home again, where we can march and find krenoj, far from this terrible place." "Some girls are sure easy to please. That is roughly what I had in mind, except when we get out of here we are going in the other direction, as far away from your krenoj crowd as I can get." Ijale listened attentively, stirring the soup with one hand and scratching inside her leather wrappings with the other. Jason found himself scratching as well, and realized from sore spots on his hide that he had been doing an awful lot of this since he had been dragged out of the ocean of this inhospitable planet. "Enough is enough," he exploded, and went over and hammered on the door. "This place is a far cry from civilization as I know it, but that is no reason why we can't be as comfortable as possible." Chains and bolts rattled outside the door, and Narsisi pushed his gloom-ridden face in. "Why do you cry out? What is wrong?" "I need some water. Lots of it." "But you have water," Narsisi said, puzzled, and pointed to a stone crock in the corner. "There is water there enough for days." "By your standards, Nars, old boy, not mine. I want at least 10 times as much as that, and I want it now. And some soap if there is such stuff in this barbaric place." There was a good deal of argument involved, but Jason finally got his way with the water by explaining it would be needed for religious rites to make sure that he would not fail in the work tomorrow. It came in a varied collection of containers, along with a shallow bowl full of powerful soft soap. "We're in business," he chortled. "Take off your clothes. I have a surprise for you." "Yes, Jason," Ijale said, smiling happily. "You're going to get a bath. Do you know what a bath is?" "No," she said, and shuddered. "It sounds evil." "Over here and off with the clothes," he ordered, poking at a hole in the floor. "This should serve as a drain. At least the water went away when I poured some into it." The water was warm from the stove, yet Ijale still crouched against the wall and shuddered when he poured it over her. She screamed when he rubbed the slippery soap into her hair, and he continued with his hand over her mouth so that she wouldn't bring in the guards. He rubbed the soap into his own head too, and it tingled delightfully as it soaked through to his scalp. Some of it was in his ears, muffling them, so the first intonation he had that the door was opened was the sound of Mikah's hoarse shout. He was standing in the doorway, finger pointed and shaking with wrath. Narsisi was standing behind him, peering over his shoulder with fascination at this weird religious rite. "Degradation!" Mikah thundered. "You force this poor creature to bend to your will, humiliate her, strip her clothes from her, and gaze upon her though you are not united in lawful wedlock." He shielded his eyes from sight with a raised arm. "You are evil, Jason, a demon of evil, and must be brought to justice." "Out!" Jason roared, and spun Mikah about and started him through the door with one of his practiced Ch'aka kicks. "The only evil here is in your mind, you snooping scut. I'm giving the girl the first scrubbing of her life, and you should be giving me a medal for bringing sanitation to the natives instead of howling like that." He pushed them both out the door and shouted at Narsisi. "I want this slave, but not now. Lock him up until morning, then bring him back." He slammed the door and made a mental note to get a hold of a bolt to be placed on this side as well. There were more krenoj for breakfast, but Jason was feeling too good